Welcome, everybody, to the All Things NBA podcast from A to Z, presented by ballislife.com. I'm Kris Pursiainen, and here, as always, alongside Zach Noble. And today, we're going to get right into it because we've got a very special man whose time is just as special, and I don't want to waste it. We've got John Carter from Noah Basketball. And the reason that this is such a special guest is because Noah Basketball is the premier, the standard, the industry expectation for shot tracking data at this point. That stop me if I'm waxing too much poetic, but I'm just trying to state facts as they come to me. 28 NBA clients. John, why don't you just start out by telling our listeners what it is you guys do? Because I think they can hear or see how excited I am that we were able to get you on the show. And I would like for them to know why, besides I'm a giant nerd.
Sure. Well, I'm a giant nerd too, by the way. But no, first off, thanks again, guys, for having me on. I'm excited to talk about what it is we do. But we have a couple different systems, just so you know. So I'll kind of delineate between those. So we have what we call our pro system, and that's what all the NBA teams have. That's what we now, by the way, have more Division I colleges that have that pro system than we have NBA teams. As an example, last week, 8 of the top 10 in the AP poll in the NCAA are avid, not just users, they're avid Noah users. So we've had a lot of success with colleges as well. So what we do is we're a data company at the end of the day. And so we track basketball shots, every shot all over the floor. And if you think of it, we provide high definition data. A player can't see if they're missing 2.7 inches to the left or 1.3 inches to the right, or the trajectory is 3 degrees higher than optimal. Those are things that the naked eye or a coach can't fully see. And so what we do, we track those shots, every shot as they're coming in. 3 really important metrics that we track that no one else does. And one is the entry angle or the arc of the shot. So what angle is the ball coming into the rim? And the absolute optimal is 45 degrees. The range of 43 to 47 is generally what we see almost every NBA player shooting. That's not a coincidence. That's where all the physics lines up in your favor. We also measure the left-right position dynamically with every shot's taken. So when a player's shooting from the right wing, we have to find the closest point on the rim to the player, and that's how we measure the left-right position. That's a critical metric. Great shooters obviously have the ability to shoot the ball straight. And so we measure that right down to the fraction of an inch. And then the third thing is the shot depth, how deep the ball went in the basket. We have found that to be one of the biggest cardinal sins in basketball shooting. It is a killer. And so, for example, even at the NBA level and the college level, it's almost no difference between the two. NBA and college teams miss short almost exactly twice as often as they miss long. And so if you could take the entire population of the NBA and college shots and shift them back a bit, the percentage would go up somewhat. At the high school level, we actually see those players miss short as much as 5 times more often than they miss long. And so oftentimes that's because they shoot too high or other issues, but it's an absolutely percentage killer. And so we've had a lot of success at that level of getting people to understand how these things matter, why they matter as much as they do. So, and then we do some other things for our pro customers or pro system users. We do facial recognition. So you can have guys running, where they're scrimmaging or, 3-player shooting drills, and we're automatically tagging all the data to the correct player. And then we're doing some other tagging, like that shot was on the move, it was stationary, they received the pass from the left, they received it from the right, they received it from the post. We do a lot of those type tags automatically as well, just an attempt to get super granular with the data, to see, kind of what's happening. But that's kind of a real high level of what we do for the pro teams.
Right.
We also have a new product we call our backboard product. We just introduced it last summer. It's a simpler version. We've shipped a ton of those to high schools already, but it's a easier to install version. Doesn't have the facial recognition, things like that. But it's a really, really cool product that's got off to a fast start for us.
No, that's amazing. And
100%.
you guys have actually been around a decent amount. What's it been, like 2004 you guys originated?
Man, it's been a long run. It's
Long
over
journey.
20 years. So I think,
I was 2 then, for what that's worth.
well,
Yeah,
yeah.
it makes me feel old. Uh, but let's hear about this origination story, how the idea came to you. I mean, your background a little bit.
Sure.
Are you a basketball guy? Are you a data guy? A little both, or?
Yeah. So let me go back to the very original start. So the founder actually I was not the original founder. It was a guy named Alan Marty. And just like a lot of, he's like a typical dad trying to help his daughter shoot better. And he was a former physics teacher and he's a VC and in the Silicon Valley. And so the original NOAA system, we always joke, was a rake attached to a ladder. And he was trying to get his daughter to shoot right over the rake. He had calculated where the shot should be, and it didn't really work. It was probably embarrassing for Carly to think through how I'm in the driveway and my nerdy dad's got a rake attached to the ladder here. And so that's where his original thought was, boy, wouldn't it be great to give a player feedback without them having to wear anything or go through anything, or shoot it through or over something or anything like that. And so that, he started the company, and then he and I met. I won't bore you with all the details of how that happened, but we met. I was in the middle of selling another company that I had started. And so we connected. I moved to chairman of this other company, and so I had time available. And when I first connected with Alan, really all I wanted to do was buy a system. I had two sons that were really into basketball, and I just wanted to get a system. Well, after we got to know each other and he learned more about my experience and I helped a little bit with distribution, then ultimately I came on as CEO and we moved everything here to Huntsville, back in, I don't know, '04 or something like that. So, but yeah, and so, the one thing I'll tell you guys, this has been a labor of love. You asked the question also, Zach. I've played coach basketball most of my life, and I've been studying shooting most of my life. I also have an engineering degree, and I have a significant background in software and used to do a lot of coding myself way back in the day. And so the previous company prior to NOAA was a software company that I founded. So I'm all of those things. I'm a data nerd. I'm a basketball guy. I'm an engineer, all those things. So this is kind of right in my wheelhouse of things I'm really passionate about. But I will tell you this, and this is really interesting. We got really bad reception from coaches and players early on.
I'm unsurprised.
What was that? Just because the analytics?
Well,
And
here's a common one, for example, and these are some prominent names that I won't say, but their names you would know is like, you are so full of it. You can't teach a player to shoot basketball with a computer. That was a common one I heard from older guys or older school coaches.
let's call them out, John. Let's call them out.
I'd love to actually, but I won't.
I would bet if there were coaches that didn't know that this was an industry standard thing, that would be against it today. Like, I don't want guys overthinking. I don't want guys over granulating. Like, this is kind of what front offices are for and kind of what data departments are for and everything. Do you find that better shooters miss left to right more or miss for shorter long more? And is that question ridiculous and blasphemous, or am I onto something by saying that, guy, it's better to see someone consistently, or I'll say better in air quotes, to see someone consistently hit the back of the rim than it is to see them hit both the left and right sides?
Yes, that's. I think make sure I understand it, but I think you're largely correct. That the great shooters, when they are not heavily defended or having to throw something off balance or something like that, they can shoot the ball straight. Almost you give a Steph Curry an open look, it's rare he's going to miss 6 inches to the left. That just doesn't happen very much. And so then it comes down to controlling the depth and if you've got the left, right in good shape, the depth, now you're talking about the trajectory, you're talking about the power, you're talking about how fatigued I am, all those type things, and how well the mechanics hold together when you're fatigued and all those type things. And that's something we're studying. We can talk about that at some point if you want as well, is, we just installed our first fully automated motion capture system so that we can break down the mechanics as well. What I explained earlier was the end result data. Okay, as the ball's coming in the rim, what's the left, right, what's the depth type thing. Now we're going back to understand, okay, what was all of the joint angles throughout that shot. And so that's going to be fascinating. That's something that's data I've wanted to have for 20 years. And so now we're going to have it here real soon.
So who are some of the first teams or players that really came around on the idea? Can you say that at least? I mean, if you can't say naysayers,
I would say a couple of the first people that were early adopters that kind of went all in on it. Tony Bennett when he was at Washington State.
Wow.
And this is the old system that only tracks straight ahead. And Tony talked a lot about using it with Klay Thompson, which was pretty cool because if you go back and look, Klay played for Tony at Washington State. One of the guys, and I'm happy to mention his name, is he's a guy named John Welch. He was with multiple NBA teams for a long time. As a college coach now, but John was one of the guys that, even though other people in his front office and other players and other coaches, whatever, is like, John, I don't want to hear about that crap. He listened, and he became one of our best users. If you go back and look at the Wall Street Journal story on Reed Shepherd last year, John was the coach behind all of that. So so those were a couple of guys that that kind of bought in really early. We also had there was a free throw coach for the Dallas Mavericks, a guy named Gary Boren. Gary was one of the first ones as well to really jump in and utilize it with players. And it was interesting, today, you think about today's players, they grew up with technology in their pocket, as far as an iPhone or a smartphone of some kind. And if you go back 20 years, I mean, we're talking flip phones, and it was a little bit different time. And so even a lot of the players were anti-tech at that point. And it's just like, we hit a little bit of a perfect storm, with technology advancing the way it did. Also, the game is obviously became more about shooting. And so that played a role as well. And then also just the tech got to a point we could do things better than we could, even 5 or 6 years ago. And all those things together. And then we went to the 2017 Sloan Sports Conference and we entered the research competition. We entered the startup competition. We ended up winning both. And just like that, we had a line of NBA teams.
Boren, forgive my interruption, but Boren is he worked pretty directly with Dirk Nowitzki, right? Are you able to share if Dirk was a hater or
I think
lover?
Dirk, I don't know that he was necessarily either. I think he certainly didn't mind being tracked, I don't believe. I also made a trip to Dallas back in those days to meet with Dirk's shooting coach, the German guy, and Holger.
Yeah, Holger.
Yeah, that was a fascinating conversation because we talked about fingertip push-ups and all the other.
Geschwinder.
I'm glad you pronounced that.
I read all about him in who wrote that book? It was like Dirk, Doc, Kobe, LeBron. It was a book about all of them. The Soul of Basketball by Ian Thompson. I learned a lot about Holger in that book.
He was a neat guy. I went down there and we just rented a meeting room at a hotel and we just went at it all day.
Yes. And, that's how, Eric Musselman talks about how his dad and Tom Thibodeau would have these like 14-hour uninterrupted mind meld sessions. And it's like, as I learn more about the sport and the leagues of basketball, I find that there's something to just getting a bunch of smart asses and putting them in a room and saying, learn, teach, something, speak.
There were certainly things that I didn't agree with what he said and vice versa, but we just kept going. So I actually really enjoyed it. You mentioned Tibbs, by the way. He's a big Noah fan. So,
it's funny. Tibbs gets this rap as being like, I think people kind of assume that they know the concept of Thibodeau. They know kind of what he roughly seems to stand for in general. And they think, oh, that's a guy that hates analytics. Meanwhile, I'm there in the press rooms being like, Tom, Emmanuel's got a positive net rating with everyone on the team. He's the only player on the team whose two-man net rating is positive for every single one of his teammates. What do you think goes into that? And he's like, he knows the data like this. He's talking about, were those high leverage minutes you're talking about, or, are those blowout situations because Obi Toppin, this and that. And I'm like, damn it, he's good. Talk about Tibbs a little bit because I've got a Knicks following that loves to hear about, I think, his idiosyncrasies and how they relate to his overall obsession with winning.
Sure. Well, I mean, first off, I don't know if there's anybody who works any harder than he does. Number one, dude lives at the gym. But he really, when he got the Knicks job, we had, and this was, I think, in the Steph Bondy article that he did way back when, but basically, a lot of times with NBA teams, you'll work with an analytics staff or you'll work with a player development guy or maybe an assistant GM or something. But with Tibbs, when we had our first call, Tibbs was on the call. The entire staff was on the call to learn about what we were doing.
Greer's, I would assume both of
Yeah,
them, maybe.
it was everybody. I mean, it was just so it was just really cool. And that's only happened one or two other times, where teams have brought their entire staff, including the head coach. And so, he really believed in it. Now it helped us a little bit that he had the guy that handles our NBA sales worked for Tibbs for a couple of years in Minnesota. So
nice.
that probably helped get the door a little bit open and get him on a call. But listen, he believes in this stuff. He believes in data. He believes in player development. And I was a little bit like you, Kris. I just think of him as old school in defense and
Ice, touch, damn it.
But no, and I remember he and I and Kris went to dinner one time in Chicago, and I thought he was great, and I really enjoyed talking to him. We always make it a point to try to connect with him at summer league or somewhere like that. But he's a good dude. He is a hooper, man, from in every way.
It's funny when people talk about his playing career because it's like, the kind of guys that teleport into his rotation from the second they're acquired and the kind of guys that it takes him a little bit to warm up to. As someone that covered the Knicks, as someone who does a podcast with a Timberwolves fan, we are very familiar, but I will say it's funny that he has that reputation because I do feel like when you cover him full time, you see he kind of does have a bias towards low efficiency bucket getters. He kind of does have a bias.
Sure.
And then you realize when you read about his playing days, this guy was, first of all, a mound round of rebound in his own right. But second of all, everyone that talked about him was like, you weren't getting the ball. He was taking 20 shots.
Right.
And I was like, you know what? That's why he respects the guys that either dominate on the ball or dominate without it. Because he knew back then, I guess, kind of the value of heliocentric offense in a way. I want to take this as an opportunity to pivot, though, and ask you about something you said earlier. The game is becoming more about shooting. Correct. Andre Roberson to Matisse Thybulle, to Josh Hart. Specialists have and will always have their roles, but it seems like nowadays shooting matters more than ever, not in an elite way, but in a baseline way. Is there any data that supports that teams defend guys more with regard to how many threes they attempt or are willing to put up, more so than how many they make out of the ones they take? Is there something to volume matters more than percentage at that granular of a level?
Yeah, I don't know. That's probably a better question for an NBA analytics person, honestly. But I think there's no question players are defended. They study every possession, every movement, every set of what gets in when guys go a certain direction. They know it's coming this direction and there are definitely plays for lower volume guys because the higher volume guys get a lot of attention. I've noticed that a lot we did the Southern Conference tournament. We tracked all the data in that game, in that conference last week, men's and women's, and we're doing the Conference USA this week. And so I've watched a lot of games recently. And it's interesting how coaches will pull a play out for a guy that doesn't shoot 10 threes a game, that shoots 2 or 3. And some coaches feel he's good for a couple. I just got to get him the right looks. I'm not sure if I answered your question there, Kris. I guess I'm not really the right.
No, I get it, and I think you did in a sense where it's like there's something to the efficiency / optimization landscape that like doesn't have to be so brutal and intense, but if you're drawing up a play for a guy who hasn't taken a 3 all night to take a 3, well, is he at all ready for that? Is she at all someone that the defense is going to respect? Is he there's a lot at any level. So it's super interesting to me.
Sure.
John, I envision this as being something more like the really nerdy, in-depth shooters, like the specialists, the guys who are great at shooting or that are good at shooting even and want to become great and like almost perfectionist, and just trying to
Sure.
improve on the margins. But like, what's the I'm not asking for a player or team necessarily, but where have you seen like the most improvement? Whether it is from like a degree that's outside of 43 or 47, or somebody shooting it way to the right or left, front, back, whatever. Like, where do you see the biggest improvement in regards to like bad shooters
Yeah,
in
the
somebody developing?
sure, great question. The players that always improve the fastest are the ones that shoot too high. So, and the thing about that's so interesting, Zach, is that was one of the things that I had really had to overcome. I mean, because I spent a decade plus just barnstorming gyms. Anybody that would let me in the door. I have done not just a few high school clinics, free high school clinics. I've done hundreds and hundreds of free high school shooting clinics just to get the word out and get in the door, collect data, etc. And the thing that was a lot of resistance, high school, college, pro, whatever, is, come on, John, you really want us to believe that shooting too high is bad? Everybody knows that the hole gets bigger as the ball's coming in steeper. And I'm like, yeah, but you didn't really understand. There's only a certain level. Like the best a player can control it's about plus or minus 2 degrees. And so what happens is that when you shoot it too high, the least little bit of a change in the trajectory, for example, if you shoot at 53 and the next one's at 55, the ball goes 7 inches shorter at the rim. I mean, it's just nuts. You just cannot control it. You're fighting the laws of physics that you can't overcome. And there wasn't any data to really point that out so clearly, but it's absolutely no question anymore. Nobody even argues it much anymore. And so, number one, if the player's shooting too high, man, they've got the laws of physics working against them. And so all they're doing is lowering their release point, mechanics, everything else the same. And the spray pattern at the rim goes from this to this as far as the depth of the shot. And so those guys and girls, they improve so fast just by doing nothing but lowering their arc. They also, when they shoot high, they already have the shoulders loose, so to bring it down is no problem. Now, sometimes a player that shoots really flat, they're really tight in their shoulder and it really feels awkward to them to raise their arc a bit. Those can have really good results as well, and they do have good results. We've just found it's not quite as fast as the player that's shooting too high. That's number one. And then also we just have so many players that miss short so much and they don't realize it. And so that's kind of second, the guys like it, they're looking at the rim mount. We have these big splash boards at these NBA facilities. If you've been in one, you may have seen it in a practice gym. Sometimes I'll see them on Sports Center in the background. And so it actually it maps every shot, kind of like the strike zone in baseball. And so you can see precisely where you're missing. And I've had guys, and I know I didn't miss short that much. And then you go back and, well, we're recording 3-second videos of all these too. We can look at that if you want. But it really does surprise people how often they miss short. And I've asked a lot of guys over the years, say, why do you think it does not bother a player to miss short? Just doesn't seem to bother them that much. But when they miss long and have one of those bad bricks, oh my goodness, it just hurts a player's soul.
It drives me nuts when I miss short. I'll tell you what. I mean,
there's almost like there's a meme out there. It sounds like World War I in that gym right now. Those kind of bricks. That's just so demoralizing.
I just want to say, I think for me, like it has something to do with my golfing background. I mean, I'm a big golfer and I hate missing putts short. Like it's always been a thing for me. Like get the ball to the hole, give it a chance to go in.
Yeah.
And that for me, that's exactly the same with shooting a basketball. Like when I'm playing, I always miss short too. Like I don't miss long too much, but it always comes down to my legs.
And I use that analogy all the time, Zach, because the golf analogy, you got to give the ball a fighting chance. I had a basketball coach use that analogy, however many years ago, and I've used it 100 times since then. It's like this is no different than the golfer, leaving his putt short. They don't go in. They just don't go in. And so kind of the ideal range, by the way, and this surprises people. I want to get this concept out there. So there's two types of guaranteed scores, okay, if the ball's reasonably straight. One's the swish. Everybody understands that. The second one is a concept that we coined called BRAD, stands for back rim and down. So if the ball comes in and it's reasonably straight, if the top half of the ball hits the back of the rim, what does it do? It just scores, right? And so if you're training a player, and this is where we ran into some real trouble, if you're training a player to swish every shot and you give them extra points for making swishes and all this type stuff, you're training them to miss short. You're training them to shoot with a depth of 9, which is the center of the basket. That's where you have to shoot it if you want to get the most swishes, because the rim's 18. But the data says that the most shots are made at 11 inches deep in the basket, so which is 2 inches past center. So then you get a combination of swish and Brad shots. And I discovered a really cool video yesterday of John Shire shooting, and he's an incredible shooter. And one of his players in the background, this was a post they made on social media, so I certainly can mention it. And so, but one of his players, because he swished the first couple, and he's like, Coach, I gotta have back rims, gotta have back rim, and he called it back rim and in instead of back rim and down, but it's the same concept. And so it was really cool to have a player. He was on his coach about not getting the ball at the back of the rim, and that made me feel good to know that they're doing that, in their gym. But that was something that was new. That was a totally new concept of understanding getting the ball deep in the basket. And I always tell people, you guys do it tonight. Watch whatever conference game or NBA games or whatever you're watching, and pay attention to what percentage of the made baskets hit the back of the rim. It's a really high percentage. It'll surprise you.
It's just so interesting.
I got a couple more. So
Go.
the basketball gun, the gun.
Sure.
That's made, don't you think that has forced people over the years to shoot the ball higher?
Yes, from shorter distances. And I tell people, I know those guys really well. The Dr. Dish guys and the shoot away guys. Shoot away is the one that makes the gun.
Yeah.
And, they're great products. It's great to get more reps and all that type stuff.
Yeah, reps.
But if you're shooting, mid-range shots, especially, or free throws, and you've got that net all the way up, you're going to shoot it in the 50s.
The wrong reps.
Yep, exactly. So now you're kind of ingraining that muscle memory to shoot it too high. And so, again, good products. I like them, but you really need the trajectory feedback so that you don't fall into that trap you just outlined right there.
All right, and then form-wise, this is my last one, then I got one fun one for you. Form-wise, what have you seen from before, like trainers, coaches? I mean, what were they working on form-wise before they got your software and now to after, like from the body?
Well, the typical, and as you guys know, our system will give you immediate verbal feedback. So say you're shooting and you're wanting to work on your arc, you'll just turn the feedback on arc. And it'll say 45, 51, whatever. Same way with left, right, -2. You can't really see that very well, but if you get that feedback, it lets you refine it just a little bit more. There's a really good Wall Street Journal story of Steph Curry and his trainer talking about using Noah and using the left, right feedback. He's talking about guys continuing to hone their craft. I think he did it within 2 inches. If it was off more than 2 inches, from 30 feet, they wouldn't count it. Even if it went in, it didn't count. So the thing I would say, Zach, is what they like to do is not monkey with a guy's shot anymore, just mess around with a shot a lot. And so what they will do is they'll turn the feedback on and let the body make the adjustments. And if that doesn't get them there, if that doesn't get them to consistency, then they might make some, light mechanical adjustments. I think the best shooting coaches out there today are more tweakers. They tweak different things. And that's honestly what I am a lot. I immediately look at what's something, because if you give a guy 3 things to concentrate on, he's not going to do any of them. You really need to focus on one thing. I think the best shooting coaches, they look at the data, they look at everything they have, and they come up with the one thing that'll make the most impact. It might be as simple as, hey, I'm going to hold the follow through until it hits something. And oddly, that makes a difference. Generally, the ball will go a little bit further and you'll miss short less often when you do that. But there's a lot of good shooting coaches out there. We hope to make them a lot better. We're never going to replace coaches. We're certainly not going to replace players or anything like that. What we want to do is augment what they're doing with AI and with data. And that's really what we're doing here.
John, you mentioned shooting coaches. I would be remiss, especially with our talk earlier about a different Texas team. Chip England, is he he's like known as the shooting coach, maybe of all time, like the
The
guy? Or,
God, the guy.
so is there any, relationship? Is he someone who uses data or anything in between?
Yeah, I don't know the day to day of. I know Chip. I've met Chip 2 or 3 times. You know, I mean, basically, look at the proof. This dude has done it. He's had great results with great players. But he's certainly one of the most respected shooting coaches out there. The one thing I will say that I remember specifically when I was presenting to Chip one time. I was talking so much about shooting the ball deep in the basket, and I was showing him exactly what 100 million shots of data said on that. And it was interesting, and because evidently this was something he had been teaching about getting the ball deep in the basket, because he made the comment, "I can't believe anybody would argue with you anymore." I mean, look at the data. But I don't, I don't talk to Chip on a regular basis. I don't know. Like I said, I've been around him a few times in meetings, and I mean, he's, like you said, he's one of the best. I mean, that's all you can really say. And there's just a lot of proof this guy's taken people like Kawhi and made them great shooters. You know, um,
Yeah, one of the biggest improvements of all time from a player just over time is Kawhi Leonard. So I don't think there's much more testament. Like I think at his absolute peak, and that's only because I mean he became the two-way player he is, and the last thing he fine-tuned was his shooting. I mean, top 15 player all time at his peak, from starting from not nowhere close to that. It's just amazing the growth he's made over his career. But I want to wrap up with this. It's been a fun conversation and great getting to know you and your business. But you're an Auburn grad. I need to know what's your March Madness prediction? How are you feeling about this team? Is it the greatest team you've ever had, or?
well, oh yeah, I don't think there's. I mean, we were ranked number one a couple of years ago. Um, but yeah, I think this team has such a good combination of experience along with some young guys, like Pettiford. So I think this team, I mean, they absolutely can do it. I think when you talk to a lot of people out there like I do, most people, feel like, Auburn's got as good a chance as anyone. So yeah, so we'll see what happens. I think a Noah customer will win it. At the end of
There's probably a good chance.
Yeah, which is great, but just a lot of good teams out there. I mean, I tell you, Houston's incredible too. We work closely with Houston. It's a great program. In fact, they've improved their 3-point shooting 5 percentage points over last year, and their free throws are up, I think, about 6% over last year. So one of our newer customers, but that team is, that team is tough as well. So it's going to be, man, we love it. We have, by the way, like next Thursday, if you want to come down to Huntsville, Alabama, you can come to one of the best watch parties anywhere. So we have a half court gym in our office. And so we turn that gym into, we will have every game. We have projections. We have all
Nice.
projectors in the ceiling, 80, 90-inch big screen TV. So we have, we don't get as much work maybe as we need to get done on Thursday and Friday of opening days of March Madness. But man, it's the best time of year. I can't wait.
All right, Chris, I'll
100%.
meet you down there. We'll
Yeah, come on
see you in
down.
Huntsville next week.
Yeah, you gotta. I'll say for the eighth time, I'm 22. That means you got plane ticket money for me. Anyway,
Got frequent flyer miles. How about that?
that said, that said, John, we could talk all day about why you're so busy, but it's a good reminder that you are so busy. So we don't want to take much more of your time. I will just say, is there any specific, you mentioned Wall Street Journal, is just your website somewhere for Noah, somewhere that our
You can go
listeners and
to
viewers
Noah.
could go?
Yeah, just go to noahbasketball.com and you'll get more information you probably want to know about than you want to know about shooting. But no, our goal, by the way, we want to reach every hoop. At the end of the day, we feel confident this new product we have is going to really spread through high school basketball and middle school basketball in a meaningful way. We also have a great partnership with Shoot 360. They have about 50 facilities. I don't know if you guys have been to one of those, but those are a little bit top golfish for basketball. You should check one of those out if you get a chance. They're in most major markets around the country now. So that's how we meet a lot of the youth market there. And then ultimately we'll end up with smart backboards at some point in the future where people can do this in their driveway. So we're doing some work on that as well. But no, it's a fun time at NOAA. We've got a really neat team here. And we're just we've got our first European customer we're installing next month as well. One of the big Madrid club teams. So no, we got a lot going on, but it's a lot of fun. We got a lot to do.
Amazing.
Nice. I see, Shoot 360 is everywhere from Canada to Taipei, so it's pretty interesting to see on there. John, thank you so much for the time. We will be rooting for you, but also maybe I don't know, once you guys take over every hoop in the world, hope you remember us.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
John, thanks so much for the time.
Hey, John,
Basketball, noahbasketball.com. Check it out, but not check it out as in like a go buy it thing. Check it out as in like a go see what your favorite basketball team is using to get better at basketball and get a little peek into the process. John, thanks so much again for taking the time. We appreciate you.
Thanks,
We
guys.
hope to have you back on. Best of luck to your clients in March Madness and for the rest of the NBA season.
Perfect. I appreciate it, guys. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, John, thanks.
All right.